Hello, my name is George Paris. I'm the CEO of Directed Energy Materials, and we're inviting you to watch this video. This is a brief private video available only to a small group of physicians specializing in bone infections and osteomyelitis. Directed Energy Materials, LLC, is a small business. We're looking for a few physicians to provide patients for an experimental treatment process as part of a grant application. If you're interested, watch the video and contact me at 301-602-1756. Who are we? Who am I? Well, Directed Energy Materials, LLC was established in 2018 and currently has 5 issued patents. They will show those on your next slide. We've been working with staff from the Maryland Proton Treatment Center in Baltimore for several years to develop new applications for proton beams in manufacturing and in medicine. In the following slides, we'll explain the novel capabilities of proton beams and show you some of our patented results. More importantly, we will disclose recent discoveries that are the subject of pending patents. We are looking to identify physicians practicing in osteomyelitis that would be interested in collaborating in a preclinical study and grant application. That's the punchline. Okay, here are our patents that we've got issued. This is as of July 1, 2025, 5 patents. Most of these don't relate directly to what we're talking about. The reason that I'm showing you these is because we need to convince you that we're really real people. We're capable of generating intellectual property. We are serious about our work. We have technical credentials, etc. And you're happy to have you search any of these patent applications. These are the actual issued patents, not applications. In the following slides, we will explain how the how the proton beam works and share some of our work with the Maryland Proton Treatment Center. Okay, now most of you probably are not very familiar with proton beams. You're probably much more familiar with X-rays, UV, stuff like that. Think about shining a flashlight into a pool of water. Okay, that's a photonic electromagnetic radiation type of phenomenon, and it is pretty it's intuitive. As the photons enter the water, they start being absorbed, and your highest energy density is at the surface, and the energy density declines as you go deeper and deeper into the pool, what we call the penetration depth here. Now, why do we do proton beams? It's an entirely different phenomenon. What you've got is a proton that has been accelerated to very high velocity, a lot of kinetic energy, and the proton enters into the material. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of how these things interact, but the point is that when proton beams into the material, they start taking that kinetic energy and transferring it into the medium. We talk about linear energy transfer, LAT, and the linear energy transfer basically represents the energy density in the medium. Now, this phenomenon, linear energy transfer, is proportional to 1 over the velocity squared, and as the velocity approaches 0, 1 divided by 0 becomes a very big number, and that's why you get this peak, and we call that the Bragg peak. The Braggs were a father-son team working in the early 1920s, and they basically were the first people to identify and report this phenomenon. So when I talk about the Bragg peak, I'm talking about this energy density area where most of the energy of the proton beam is delivered. You notice we do deliver some energy along the way, but interestingly, we don't deliver energy beyond that peak because the proton stopped. Once it stopped, no kinetic energy, no energy to deliver. Interesting phenomenon. Okay, here's an example. This is our first patent issued about December 2022, I guess over 2 years ago. And what we have here, if you look at the diagram, number 1 on this diagram would represent the pool of liquid resin. We have done a lot of work with acrylic resins. Other resins work similarly. And number 2 is a proton beam coming in from the left. The proton beam enters the medium and starts slowing down. At some point, the energy density increases enough such that the resin, the liquid resin, starts turning into solid resin. You have a catalytic free radical chain reaction occurs, and you get a solid. Now that threshold where the energy density is enough to cause polymerization is indicated by that horizontal line number 6 on the graph at the top. I'll show you an actual example of this in just a second. This is one of the first things we did with our, I've appeared it down here at the bottom. There is actually a picture of the skull is behind my head, but you can just think of it as working on my head. Okay, this is actually not an unusual phenomena. They treat tumors in all parts of the human body. Okay, basically over here on the left, we have a plastic skull. This is a anatomically correct plastic skull. We have mounted a plastic sphere inside that skull. And inside that plastic skull, if you look at the top, we have, well, we've got a index system created in there, 3-dimensional index, and we have included a liquid resin. If you go down to the skull with the green X on it and whatnot, those are lasers that are being used to line the skull up so that we know exactly where we're going to shoot the proton beam. That is not the proton beam. That is the lasers used to align the skull. And then when we actually fire the proton beam, unfortunately, I'm obscuring that image. We ended up with that resin. You'll notice when I took the sphere out of the skull and drained out the liquid resin, what was left was this blue blob of solid resin in the center. Now, I don't need to go into why the resin changed color. Just I'll point out that we've set this up such the resin, as it reacts, produces more blue color. And so you'll notice that most of the resin didn't change color, it just drained out of the skull, out of the sphere that was in the skull. And so the proton beam actually went through the skull, went through the packing material, went through the plastic sphere, went through the liquid resin without changing it, until it got to the Bragg peak and delivered enough energy at the Bragg peak to cause a chemical reaction. And there you had the solid resin deposited on the index marker that we created. Okay, while we're doing all this work with proton beams, we started doing literature research. We looked at PubMed, we looked at Chem Abstracts, we looked at US and foreign patents, and we were surprised at one thing we did not find. Okay, we found a lot of many different applications on tumors, but we never found anybody who had done any work and produced any data or even speculated about the use of proton beams to kill microorganisms of any sort in any medium. Thus, we set up some elementary experiments to see if it would work. Okay, what we did, we took, we're not biologists by training, so we took a bunch of petri dishes and we inoculated them with a broth of fecal bacteria. They were all treated exactly the same, randomly set up, stacked up as you see here on the left, so we'd have a depth of petri dishes. The red cap at the top, you'll notice there's some numbers on it. The numbers are 0, 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32. And what we did, we sent proton beams down through that, and those numbers are the numbers of seconds that the proton beam was applied. And when we finished that irradiation, we took these petri dishes out of the system and incubated them for a couple of days to see if anything would grow on them. Obviously, after we inoculated them, there was nothing growing, but we figured something will grow. And so here's what we saw. Number one was at the top. You'll notice there's a pretty healthy group of colonies of bacteria growing there. But you'll notice it's asymmetric, which you would probably expect since some of the beams were actually for 0 seconds, 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32 seconds. And so we would expect there to be some asymmetry in the position of these bacteria. Number three, the third dish down, is similar. There's fewer bacteria colonies, but there's still, you can see the asymmetry in where they grew. Number six was even deeper still. There's fewer colonies. And by the time you get down to number 8, you have very few colonies, and that's exactly where we would expect the Bragg peak to be. So this was very interesting to us. We said, hey, we better patent that. And we have submitted, actually over a year ago, we submitted the provisional patent, and we have, within the last couple of months, we have submitted a full patent application. So that's a patent pending situation. It is not widely known what we have done. But we wanted to do this a little more sophisticated. So we decided to take a plastic tube, pour our own agar, melt agar, pour it into the tube. We filled the tube about 2/3 full with agar, then we laid it flat on its side so the agar would all go to one side. And if you look at this cross section on the left here, basically we have the tube 2/3 full of liquid agar, or now it solidifies into a gel. And the star there represents the position roughly where we plan to send the proton beam into the system. Now the proton beam has to go through the agar, because if it didn't go through the agar, it wouldn't slow down. The agar is what slows it down. And so it progresses through the agar, but just under the surface, so that as we try to grow bacteria or other organisms on the surface, the proton beam will potentially impact that as it goes by. When it hits the Bragg peak, we would expect that to be the maximum energy, and we'd expect something to happen at the Bragg peak. The linear energy transfer would be from the proton to the medium would be maximized. And this is what we got. Now on the left-hand side, you'll notice what we did. We had 2 tubes. We set one up to be irradiated, and I don't recall exactly what our plan was, but I think we wanted to minimize any effect of the metal top. And so we put it in the holder upside down, and we irradiated it from the top. Now the Bragg peak in the system would appear just about where the tube goes into the test tube holder that it's mounted in. So when we took the 2 tubes out, one tube had not been irradiated, it was a control, and one tube had been irradiated, it was the irradiated tube. We put them with the metal tap at the top, so keep all that in mind. And out of the 2 tubes, we had pretty good growth of, this happened to be, what we inoculated these tubes with was actually a broth of soil organisms. This was a soil conditioner extract that's sold to make your garden soil healthier. And I think this is actually a fungus of some sorts, probably a yeast. And it is growing in there, and you get these nice puffy white colonies. And in the control, you just got a nice conventional homogeneous pattern. But in the irradiated sample, you get sort of exactly what you'd expect if the proton beam were killing off these colonies, or killing off the individual organisms that created the colonies. And so what you're looking at here on the right is, if you start from the bottom, that's where the proton beam entered through the plastic bottom, and you'll notice it's a little bit thinned out relative to the unirradiated one. But then when you get to where we expect the Bragg peak to be, you suddenly have a very substantial reduction in the number of these colonies of whatever this organism happens to be. Like I said, I think it's a fungus of some sort. And then beyond the Bragg peak, just as you would expect, because the proton stops and doesn't deliver any more energy, you still have a substantial growth of these colonies. So obviously this whole process is patent pending. We hope to hear from the Patent and Trademark Office examiners over the next, will probably take a year to get this patent issued, but we think we've got essential information to make this work. We have done other types of experiments as well, and we have other experiments planned, depending sort of on which way we go in some of our research. Now, proton beams are currently and extensively and exclusively used to treat tumors. We haven't found any documentation of anybody doing anything else. That's what the FDA has permitted, and we think that proton beams might be very safe, quick, and effective ways to kill bacteria and other organisms in localized chronic infections. We don't see any reason we can't kill bacteria, fungi, other microbes of all sorts, regardless of whether it's antibiotic resistant or not. Especially those infections that are not responding to antibiotics. If you can kill it with antibiotics, fine, go ahead. But if you can't kill it with antibiotics or other treatments, then this might be a way to go get it, because you're not limited by blood flow, you're not limited by antibiotic resistance or any of that sort of thing. It's acting, just like radiation, that you can apply very, very selectively within the tissue. Now, if you're interested in this phenomena, if you'd like to hear more details about proton beams or our plans, we'd love to have you contact me, George Paris. My email is antimony, ANTIMONY _121 @hotmail.com. That happens to be antimony's chemical element. I'm a chemist. 121 is the principal isotope of antimony. So that's how I remember what my email address is. My phone number, 301-602-1756. If you see this video, you're going to be one of the few people who see this video, because it's not being broadcast widely. It will be distributed through YouTube, but only a few people will know where it is or how to get to it. So that's our message to you. We'd very much like to hear your opinions, see if you think that this might work, understand what your problems are with treating bone infections in particular. We have done enough literature research to realize that people with diabetes have problems, especially with their feet. We think that might be a good place to start. Somebody who's got a chronic infection of their foot, they're facing amputation or other problems, might be willing to participate in a clinical trial, small scale, just to see if there'd be a positive effect. We have to go through FDA before we can do any sort of treatment like this. The only other way to get there would be if Maryland passes what's called the Right to Try 2.0 Act. You may have heard of Right to Try, but that only applies to actually people who are about to die. But 2.0 would apply to people who have serious, debilitating situations, who might be willing to try a treatment which has not been proven to be safe and effective. In any event, keep us informed. We'd like to discuss this with you. We think that people doing work with bone infections might be particularly interested in this type of approach. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.